Hey, Greg, good morning for me, and it's about midday for you, I think. Yeah?
Yeah, just good afternoon for me.
Yeah, how you doing
It's a
today?
lovely day. It's great to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. It's your second or third time back.
I think my second time on with you, but
Yep.
if you count all the questions I ask in your live chat sometimes, it might as well be the third.
Yeah, exactly. You're one of the active participants, especially anytime we do anything deep divey that involves technical conversations. You'll usually be one of the ones who's asking some of the Microsoft PMs that I have very specific questions on current and upcoming features and limitations or other just deep dives on the platform. So I always appreciate those.
Yeah, I got to meet Rui in Copenhagen a few weeks ago for the first time in person. And he was like,
Oh, that's
"You're
awesome.
Greg, right?" And he just recognized me from the questions I've been asking.
As soon as she's like, yep, yep, 100%. So, I mean, honestly, anytime for even the people listening I always appreciate having this be conversation not only between myself and the guest, but the chat. So questions are always encouraged, as you can see from the chat window over here. If you have one, start it with a Q. We may talk about it immediately now. It might be something that we discuss during a general Q&A at the end, but we love to have conversations with the people in the chat to be able to keep this very fluid and relaxed. So encourage you to throw those in there throughout the live stream. But otherwise, what I want to get started with a little bit is some conversations around maybe a chance for you to introduce yourself a little bit and give a bit of an elevator pitch on kind of who you are and segueing into also what we'll be talking about today.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm here to talk about Argus PBI, which is a company that I've co-founded with a partner. And what we're trying to do is to make it easier and more approachable to monitor and operate Power BI at scale. And that ends up meaning a few things, but for the most part, what we're focusing on right now is operational monitoring, being able to look at everything that's happening in a Power BI tenant in a single pane of glass, from user activity through data lineage and refresh monitoring,
Hmm.
so that you can understand what's going on, what you're spending money on, who's using it, are you getting value out of this Power BI investment you've been making, and to do so in a way that's a lot more approachable and a lot more intuitive than some of the reporting that Microsoft has put out there.
And I definitely know there's a lot of limitations into their consumption portal for the usage metrics and everything that they have. And I think is it 30 or 60 days before it
So
starts to truncate?
it's a great question, and I think it leads right into why this is a useful space to be in. The answers all start with it depends, and the answers change depending how you do things. And our goal is to simplify all of
Yeah.
this so that you don't even need to know that the user activity API for Power BI is a 30-day retention. But if you go through the Office 365 or Microsoft 365 now admin portal, you can get 90 days of history through the Microsoft 365 audit logs. It's the same
Yep.
exact data, two different places, two different retentions.
And I think even if you throw it into like log analytics, then you essentially just you're recording indefinitely. But
Hmm.
yeah, it's the quickest, easiest plug and play one. Is a very short window before you start losing that history. So you have no ability to actually compare
Yeah.
seasonality across years or anything else to even know how is my overall usage in January versus June or anything like that. So I
Yeah.
think it's a good space to be in. We've gotten better. I will say that the current usage report it's a lot prettier. Somebody actually with a bit of a UI design helped about with that a bit and some bookmarking and everything. But there is a lot more data in there now versus the initial version, which was really just like Fred opened the report at 9 a.m. That's pretty much it. So like you had almost no other telemetry.
Hmm.
So I think between yourself making some of these, would you call yours? Would it be a SaaS product that you would describe this as?
Yeah, absolutely. So,
Yeah.
and we're not the only ones working in this space. There are a number of open source options. I see Used in the chat. He's got something that
Yep.
he's been working on with Azure Data Factory. This is for Argus, though, a SaaS offering. So, what we want to offer is a turnkey solution. You don't have to spin anything up in your own environment. You don't have to worry about data storage. You don't have to worry about keeping up with the changes. We'll actually see some stuff as we look at demo where there's just there are empty things being returned from the APIs as Fabric is spinning up, and Fabric stuff does not populate fully right now. And what we'll do is, as soon as there's stuff available, as soon as data is populated, we're making updates to reports, we're making updates to the back end to keep
Mhm.
up with everything that Microsoft is pushing out at this incredible pace that they've been on since May. So you don't ever have to worry about what's changing in Power BI. You can always come to Argus and you'll have up-to-date data, you'll have data retention, and it'll be dealing with everything that Microsoft has been changing or updating in the service.
I think what, and I have a follow-up question to that, and if you don't mind, I can also just flip over to the screen so they have something to kind of stare at for the portal that
Oh,
we
sure.
have here. But so, do you do any kind of scraping of like the GitHub repository of listed APIs that they have as connection points for the tool, or is it something that you're just monitoring to see like what's available in terms of data that can be extracted from that?
Sure. So we don't have anything that is automatically looking for new endpoints or anything like that. Every time we onboard a new API endpoint or a new data source for Argus, it goes through our own development process, and
Mm-hmm.
that's quite lightweight. We can onboard a new API in about a day or two. If it's something with really gnarly history management or rate limits, it might take us closer to a week, but we can onboard new data sources very quickly. But we also want to make sure that we can offer curated experiences in the reports that we provide so that you can have understandable data. And that requires some more ETL. That requires us to actually shape the data and put together meaningful reports that excuse me, that answer questions that we've seen at a number of consulting clients and that we've seen from our existing customer base. So we're not just going to throw raw data at you. We're going to digest that and make sure that there's something you can understand and that's meaningful, not just raw API outputs.
Excellent. Okay. Yeah. So I can, as you've mentioned, I think a lot of what becomes important with these types of platforms is really being able to get a client voice for that. So it's nice to know that this is not only a collection of what you've probably already ascertained from a lot of client interactions, but I'm guessing that this thing will be continuing to kind of evolve as that stuff goes going forward. I know looking at some of the other monitoring tools that I've seen historically that have been out there. One nice thing that I've also just seen with Microsoft is as companies like yourself build these, their conversational with those organizations when they find gaps where it's like, hey, I'm using a tool. I have a lot of large enterprise clients that are actually really needing to get this data, and it's not an endpoint that's available. And like I think that's over the years how some of the endpoints have actually been exposed down the line is them realizing that people wanting to connect to it as an advocate for a client voice has helped them to identify those gaps on missing data points that they want to collect on usage.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's always a collaboration among end customers, ISVs, and Microsoft. I think the thing that's become very clear over decades of Microsoft's existence is that they do platforms very well. Power BI and Fabric are incredible platforms. SQL Server is a great database, but Redgate is a huge company, and Redgate builds tools for SQL Server. Builds monitoring for SQL Server. Microsoft builds the platform in such a way that all of the relevant data is captured, and they build the features that are necessary for this type of monitoring. But Microsoft usually does not take it all the way in terms of operational tooling and operational
Yeah.
monitoring for their own products. They build the platform and the building blocks. And it's always been a collaboration with ISVs who can step in and have 100% focus on a narrow area and serve that a lot better. If Microsoft's building monitoring reports, for example, those are going to be effective. They're going to have the useful information, but they end up being closer to a box checking exercise than they are to a whole product focus. And what we do is we focus only on operating Power BI. So right now, that's whole-tenant monitoring. In the future, we've got some pretty big plans for how we can help out with the automation side of operations as well, but that's nothing I'm ready to talk about today. And that's something where we're going to spend all of our day looking at this, focusing on this, talking to customers
Excellent.
about monitoring, about operating Power BI, about their needs for what information they need to effectively manage Power BI, and what their needs are on a day-to-day operational basis. And that's our focus. And when you talk to us, you get one of us, you get a human, and you get someone who's deeply focused on operations rather than someone who is focused on growing Power BI, the multi-billion-dollar platform.
I agree. And I think as you mentioned, Microsoft does a really good job of providing, it's almost like a Lego kit. They'll give you all the necessary Lego pieces. They don't necessarily build it for you with a lot of these. I mean, they've done the same with custom visuals and a bunch of other stuff.
Hmm.
It's been changing, but they'll give you the kit, but then give you the freedom to assemble it yourself. And I say freedom, like sometimes it's also just it's a cost-effective solution. Let the community build it rather than you. Again, they've been doing better at starting to build some of the rooms themselves, but um, there's less missing features on what to connect and more of just like a one-stop turnkey type solution for this. So where would you like to get started on kind of digging into this?
Yeah, so we're looking at the Argus PBI page right now. I've just got this up so that people can see it and come back to it if they'd like to learn any more or contact us after this live stream. But what I really want to start with is what Microsoft does make available to us. And that's their REST APIs for Power BI. And this is on their Learn portal. There are a lot of things that we can get out of Power BI. And right now we're just looking at metadata only operations. So we mostly live our lives in this admin API section. I'm not going to walk through every single one of these, but I do want to look briefly at the scanner, which is probably something that a lot of people have heard of. I don't know if too many people have actually started using the scanner API themselves, but this is the type of thing that Microsoft makes available and the type of thing that we turn into an easy mode and a push button for you to be able to get this information flowing for your tenant. And the scanner is not one thing. It's documented well, but there's a workflow around it. The scanner starts with getting modified workspaces. You want to know what workspaces exist, what's out there, and what's changed since the last time you did all of this. After you've got a list of workspaces, what you need to do is ask for a scan to be started with this post workspace info API. And this is going to be asking for information about a list of workspaces. And then there are limits around how often you can call this. There are limits around how many requests you can make simultaneously. And when you make this request, Microsoft just gives you back an ID, and then you have to figure out when that ID for that scan is done, and then you need to get the results. And there are rate limits around all of these APIs. So with the scanner, you can only have a maximum of 16 simultaneous requests going at once. After you get that ID, you have to check what is the status of this scan. And once that scan is completed, you can finally actually get those scan results. This is the type of workflow that doesn't fit well into Power BI. Putting this into a PBIX file or into a data flow is not something that's going to fit well. So this requires some sort of ETL process outside of what you can do easily in Power BI. I think especially as we see Fabric coming to GA, there will be more solutions and more interactions that we can cover with notebooks as a host environment. But again, this is a type of data gathering that's not necessarily in the wheelhouse of many Power BI administrators. This is something that requires you to get out of the Power BI world and into more of an application development and API interaction world. This is how Microsoft makes data about Power BI available. But the people who care most about Power BI data are not necessarily back-end developers, not the people who are going to build a system to call all of these APIs, collect all of this data, and run this scalably and in a cost-effective manner. The people who want information from these APIs are people who are going to be most familiar and most comfortable with Power BI itself. And so that's what we do, is we capture all of this metadata, all of this information about your tenant using the Power BI APIs, going through officially Microsoft supported endpoints. We capture all of this, and then we persist that data for you in blob storage, and we build these Power BI reports. We make these data sets available to our customers to customize if they'd like, but we also are very happy to hear feedback and build customizations and build new features for our customers. And so we report to you about all of your Power BI tenant metadata in Power BI itself. So you just come to an app that we share with you, and you'll get a list of reports to cover all of these different areas. And with these, you'll then be able to manage Power BI, monitor Power BI directly from within Power BI using familiar tools, using familiar visuals. And again, we make the data set available. We don't hide any of the raw data. That's available to you as well through blob storage. So if you want to dig into that yourself, build other reports, or bring this into a different environment, we totally support that. And we make all of this available. But the easiest way to get started is signing up with Argus, and then we just give you these reports, and you go to this link, and you've got all of this information about your own tenant. So that's our goal, is to make this as turnkey and as push button as possible to start getting valuable information about what's going on in your tenant.
So I'm curious about and this is one thing that I've thought of for a long time, is like we have good usage to the performance, a lot of other stuff that goes into even the reports. I know I believe at the moment there's no page level metrics that go all the way down with the endpoint. Is there?
Correct. The usage monitoring and the user activity only goes down to a report level or an artifact level of what someone is interacting with. It does not go to the page level, but we have seen in Microsoft's updated feature adoption hub that they have the page level. And I know that the APIs are getting a lot of attention internally. So I would expect to get more information from that user activity endpoint sometime, quote unquote, soon, as Microsoft likes to say. There's been no timeline announced. There's nothing I'm aware of that they're working on specifically, but I do know that the APIs in general are getting a lot more attention with Fabric, and also just based on years of feedback now from the community. So I would not be surprised if that information became available in a future update to the APIs, or potentially a V2 of the APIs.
I've always thought about some ways to kind of do that yourself a little bit, like the having creating a like a bit.ly URL or something else that is or an image, something like that. And you just basically put a little like background visual on a page that that loads that every time somebody looks at that page, which then just triggers recording. Like you don't ever know who it is, but you can at least
Mhm.
know how often a page is loaded, or if there's like a certain slicer selection on a page, you could also trigger similarly a URL or a visual to load a certain URL, which can then tell that a person is using a slicer or something. I've had many ideas over the years around like how can we do visual level or page level monitoring, at least just for anonymized tracking of what pages are and are not used. It's always been interesting just because it's not exposed. And I know a lot of people would like more detailed report um, analytics, like because it's just looking at a report just means that a person opened it, but how much value did they actually obtain from it?
Yeah, and so there are a few paths there. I know some people have done some work with putting a tracking pixel onto every single report page. That requires a lot of manual intervention. You need to remember to put this
Yes.
onto every single page. It needs to be unique per page. You need to track
Yep.
those. The path that we're planning on, if Microsoft does not give us an API endpoint, will be unfortunately capacity only. It would not work for pro licensed workspaces, shared capacities, but we are so what we're looking at right now is a series of reports, and we'll look at a couple of preview things as well as some of the stuff we've got live right now. And this is all hitting APIs, so it's available for every single Power BI customer. Doesn't matter how you're licensed, everything that we look at today is available to everyone. But our next major area of development is going to be hitting log analytics for premium capacities. And one of the nice things we get out of log analytics is metadata that will include, down to the visual actually, uh, what the source of that query is. And so then we
Mhm.
should be able to backtrack from log analytics into detailed page level interactions. So that's something that's on our backlog. I can't make any guarantees about what specific information will be there, but from what I've looked at in log analytics, there's more than enough information to get into that. And that would be no touch solution. You wouldn't have to do anything to your reports. You wouldn't have to do anything to your tenant. You would just need to turn on log analytics, and then we'd be able to get all that information for you directly from what's captured in the metadata of log analytics. But that is, like I said, that's in the future. It's not something we've
Mhm.
got available or ready to demo today.
Yeah, yeah, no problem. But it's good to know that there are some additional features on the horizon with some of this stuff.
Absolutely, yeah. And we've got, at the very least, whiteboarded paths to answer every single question a customer has asked of us. Obviously, there's the matter of time and prioritization, but we should be able to get everything people need. Is everything people have asked us for so far? We've at least got a whiteboard solution to get there, and it's a matter of prioritization, working with our customers to
Yep.
figure out what's going to be the most useful and what we can get out. But yeah, the next big thing for us is going to be capacity monitoring with log analytics.
Excellent. And I know there's a lot of exposed items in there that will, as you mentioned, get allow you to have a much meatier report down the line for some of this stuff. But I think even what you've been providing here so far, being able to get this detailed statistical information, I think helps to people really tune and optimize to a significant degree for sure.
Yeah, and I mean, we're doing some things that are really simple that are just not available in the Power BI portal at all. And a good example is this page we're looking at right now. This is part of an updated refresh monitoring report. This one that we're looking at, it says preview in the title because this is part of the new version, but this page is live now and has been since launch for us. So this is every single refresh happening in a tenant. And this is something that you cannot see anywhere in Power BI. You can get your refresh history with up to 7 days of refreshes for an individual data set, and that's navigating through to a workspace and finding the refresh history for that specific data set. There is a part of the admin portal where you can see the most recent refresh that has happened for every data set on a premium capacity, but that's not your whole tenant. And also it's only the most recent refresh, but there's nowhere that you can go and see every refresh that's occurring. And what we do is we hit a couple of APIs, we capture all of this information, and we capture much more than 7 days of history. In this demo tenant, we've been going back quite a while, so we can see refreshes back 180 days or more. I'll keep this a little bit more constrained just so we've got something that's easier to see in the demo, but we keep all of this history for you. We make that history available to you, as I said, in blob storage, but we also provide all of this reporting directly in these Power BI reports for you. And so we can look at refreshes that are occurring in the tenant. What we're seeing in this chart on top is a total number of refreshes every day are the columns, and then the average duration is this superimposed line. And we can see that something happened here in August. We've got some stuff that's getting longer. And this is the sort of thing that you can't identify in the Power BI portal. With all of these, we can show you what our longest and shortest refreshes are. We can quickly narrow in on the refreshes that are taking exceptionally long. And this is a demo tenant, so there's not too much heavy lifting going on, but our longest refresh in the last 60 days is 3.8 minutes. And the durations are actually really important to know of refreshes that are happening in the tenant, because there are a number of limits to how long a refresh can run. On pro capacities, you can only refresh for 120 minutes at a time. After that, it will fail regardless of what's going on. On premium capacity, it's 5 hours. And so being able to see who's trending upward, what data sets are taking longer, what data sets are pushing up towards those limits, that's something that allows you to look around the corner and do preventative maintenance rather than reactive maintenance to a report or a data set that all of a sudden stops refreshing. We can also quickly zero in failures, and so we can see what's going on that might be affecting data sets throughout the tenant. And we can see here a really interesting pattern actually of this usage metrics report. This is failing 4 days in a row. And another thing that's not super well documented is if you get a refresh that fails 4 days in a row or 4 times in a row, Power BI will just turn that off for you. So you might have a schedule that gets disabled because it failed a few times in a row. And so if you're gone for a long weekend or something like that, these 4 failures 4 days in a row, that means that data set's no longer refreshing. And instead, you've just got this thing that's stale as of the last successful refresh. And this one I've left in here. I know what's happening here. I saw the failure on day 1. I had changed my password, and that invalidated the token that the usage metrics report uses. And so it started failing. And I just let it fail because I know that that one will eventually stop refreshing, so that I can show that in this demo. Anything that fails 4 times in a row immediately gets disabled. And so if we look at the workspace that one was in, we'll see a bunch of direct query refreshes. Then we go back down here to this usage metrics. There's no refresh for this after the 28th, after that 4th failure in a row.
So, and I'm assuming each one of those little underlying items will take you to the corresponding page, just as a reminder.
Yeah, that's absolutely correct. So what we can do is, unfortunately, I've got to hop around a little bit across multiple profiles here. But if you're signed into your own, tenant, there's absolutely no hopping around profiles necessary. But I'll pull this up in a second window. And so clicking on that link, going to that hyperlink takes you directly to this data set within your tenant. so that you can quickly go in and troubleshoot that failure. If you're seeing a failure, you can come in here and interact with it in the tenant directly without any issues. You can pop directly from our reports into your tenant, operate on your things, and then you can see what's going on with that
That's awesome.
specific artifact.
I had one question for Andrew that I wanted to pop up onto the screen here.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
can you see the refresh metrics by table, partition, data, or I don't know about the recalc last part, unless you read that, but at least for the other ones.
Yeah, so by the API, we do not get all of that information. We will see whatever parameters are given to the enhanced refresh API. If you're calling that enhanced refresh API, we'll get those details uh, from the refresh APIs, but we'll be able to get a lot more level of detail as we bring in the capacity monitoring and log analytics. That'll show us every single analysis services event that's happening as part of a refresh. So right now we've got the refresh and its duration. We've got the parameterization you give to the enhanced refresh API if you are refreshing via the API, and we can show those timings based on that. But as we bring in log analytics, we'll be able to give you a detailed breakdown both of memory consumption and time spent on each individual partition and what those specific refresh operations are, whether it's a process full, a process recalc, or a process data only via the XML endpoint. We'll be able to give you all of that detail.
That's awesome. Okay, perfect. Thank you for the context on that.
Yeah, absolutely. And a very good question. And like I said, we've not hit the log analytics yet, but we've got a path to. I love these questions. So far, we've got a path to everything we've been asked, but I would love to hear people's use cases. I love to know what people are needing to see, because that's the best input for us to drive development of these. So
You broke up just a little bit. Say that last part. Yeah, sorry, you broke up just a little bit for me. Say the last part one more time.
Yeah, I just love getting questions. Those are some of the best things to drive development prioritization for us. So thanks very much, Andrew.
And I'll give context for Greg's one of the more technical people that I know. Like on the Slack channel that we're on, if people can ask a DAX question and I'll get a response of like 2 paragraphs of a DAX solution. Like, oh, you're on the computer? No, I'm on mobile, like somewhere out there. But I off memory, I managed to type up what I think there might be 1 or 2 syntax errors, but otherwise this is probably how you would be writing this. So when he says he likes to get deep dive technical questions, he does. I think you very much enjoy the conversations around this.
Yeah, absolutely. I love the details.
What are some of your favorites, the things that provide an ROI, but ones that might be like in a surprising area, or anything that's like from a technical perspective? Just curious, like considering that you've spent so much time building all this out.
Yeah, so I think it's actually some of the really low-hanging fruit. And it's a perfect cue up for the next thing I wanted to show, actually, is an idea of concurrent data source refreshes. So this is leveraging data from a couple different pieces of metadata, but we know every single data source that exists in a data set. That information's available. You could go to a data set in Power BI and you could look at what it's configured to refresh from, and you could see, it's hitting this SQL server, or it's hitting that file system, or it's hitting that SharePoint, and so on. So that information is there to understand what goes into a data set. The refresh API, what we were looking at on that first page, is showing refreshes by data set. And so we can see what data sets are refreshing when. But one of the things, and this is actually directly from a request from a customer, and one that we're probably going to have published here within the next couple of weeks, is this idea of hitting data sources during refresh. That's not something that you can get to in one step, but it's something that you can put together 3 steps of scanner metadata API. You put together the hierarchy that includes data sources and data sets, and then we can capture how many data refreshes are happening against individual data sources at a given time period. And so this is basic Power BI stuff. This is something I would expect any junior or new developer in Power BI to be able to put together if given the right data and if given a little bit of time. It's not a super complex report, but I think that's where a lot of the value is that this is very easy to understand, and it's putting together a few pieces of information. And that's where a lot of the ROI is finding those connections that you can make with 2, 3, maybe 4 or 5 steps. And by putting those things together, then get this entirely new view of the information. And so again, this is a demo tenant. And so there's not an interesting finding here, but I've got an anonymized screenshot of that same report. And this was a customer that we're working with this preview report to understand how hard they're hitting backend SQL Server databases. And they had an impression that they were hitting SQL Server all at the same time, but they didn't have a good way to confirm that without manually going through and checking every single refresh schedule, every single manual refresh of their data sets, and then manually tying those data sets to their SQL Server data sources. And what they were able to find is this circled or this squared off item down at the bottom. They're hitting this database with 44 different data sets worth of refreshes during the time period from 11 to midnight UTC. And so this is absolutely slamming a backend data source. This is the sort of thing that could bring down a database, or could at the very least cost you extra if you have to scale that database up. If it's serverless, it could cost you in performance of some other application that shares that database. Or heck, this could be the thing that pushes you up to your 2-hour time limit for a refresh, because every individual refresh could run in under an hour. But when you've got 44 data sets hitting that same database in the same hour, then each of those, because there's so much contention, could push you over into that failure time limit. And you might see failures even though every individual source query is fine. The failure is simply because you're running 44 data sets against this one database in the same hour.
That's why I do really wish that Microsoft made it a bit easier to pick a time, because you only have, the hour, half an hour, and at a minimum, it would just be nice if they added a 15-minute increment, or just let you type in the minute that you wanted to do that on. So I know it's not too hard to do with Power Automate. There's a very easy, just at 6:05 every day, run a refresh, but it's obviously significantly more technical, and it could help you avoid stuff like that. So it's I hope someday they just make it a bit easier through the native UI to stagger those, or if you schedule a refresh, then maybe have a pop-up that actually says, within your tenant there are currently 300 other data sets that are scheduled for midnight. Would you like to pick a different time? It doesn't have to tell you where. It doesn't give you any sensitive information on what it is, but it knows the data already at the tenant level, and it can, through some kind of OpenAI process, just let you suggest some other times maybe to do that. Obviously this is where our tools like this and our jobs as consultants comes into play. But there are certain things that are easy enough avoidable that people shouldn't have to pay extra cost for that, versus the portal should hopefully give them some better information on how to stagger refreshes.
Yeah, absolutely agreed with you there. And like I said, the information's all there, and you can get to all of that information for a data set in the portal. It's putting together 2 or 3 steps and then being able to combine that, where we see a lot of value for our customers being able to identify that sort of thing. And like you said, it'd be great if that could be automatically, or at least suggested in the Power BI portal directly. But right now, what we can do is we can show you where these challenges are and make it very easy to go and check out what's happening there.
Excellent.
Yeah. Another thing that we've been working on is more of a data set focused overview of refreshes. And so with this one, we've just got every data set that's been refreshed in the time period. We can tell you how many times it's been refreshed. We can tell you how long that's taking on average, the minimum and maximum refresh times, as well as the standard deviation. So if we see wide variance in here, that's definitely something we want to look at. If we see a maximum in the time period that's creeping up toward a timeout limit, that's definitely a data set to check out and see if there's something that we can optimize, if there's something that we can improve on that specific data set's refresh schedule. And again, this is a little demo tenant, so we've only got a handful of data sets refreshing in this time period. But in larger tenants, what we can do is we can really easily narrow in on what might be a production workspace. So if you know that all of your important reports are being served out of just a few workspaces or from a few data sets, you can filter this down to specific workspaces and specific data sets very quickly, and also just save that out as a personal bookmark directly within the app. And so you can always come back to, my prod stuff really easily in Power BI.
And I want to call out the fact that the importance of, if you look at the lower right, you see that your personal workspace is in there. that will capture everyone's personal workspace from the Power BI admin, correct?
Yes, yeah. So we
Good.
see everything.
Yeah, because that is and I saw this years ago with like another tool, but there are those there are some individuals who will publish a ton of stuff to their personal workspace. They also might be these fat bloated models with ill performance refreshes or a bunch of other stuff. So it's like your workspaces might be perfectly tuned, but unfortunately from the native Power BI experience, you actually have no telemetry really into individuals' personal workspaces. So if you have capacity, a lot of the storage space could be taken up by that. You
Hmm.
might be getting ejections from certain things because of those. So like there's a lot of consideration on wanting to monitor those, which is I think good to have as an exposure. It's like you see that Mary or Steve, like, why do you have 100 reports and data sets in your personal workspace? You need to get those out of there and go and delete some of these.
It's interesting that you say that. We can
Yeah,
see in
there
this
you go.
tenant
Look at all these
exactly
personal
who's got
workspaces. Yeah,
all of those data sets in their workspace.
Brent. Brent needs a slap on the hand. Also, 32 reports, 31 data sets. What's up with that data siloing? There should be like 5 to 10 data sets for 32 reports.
I agree. But again, this is some of this stuff was we wanted to populate things for this demo.
Of
So this is,
course.
yeah, so this is some of it's intentionally bad. And I'm just going to use that excuse every time we see something bad to say that that was on purpose. Definitely not accidental.
Now, one thing I would be interested to see as well, the from a so if you go to the dataset page,
Yeah. Back to the refresh monitoring, or did you want to see all data sets?
yeah, all the data sets. Like I'm curious the general the minimum yeah, here we go. So data sets to reports and the uh I usually have at least like a 2 to 1. Like it at a bare minimum for your company, you should have on average 2 reports to every data set. Like obviously you would hopefully a lot better. You could have 10 or 15 reports to a single one, but at least a 2 to 1 ratio is good for that. So I can imagine as something useful to have onto here is like your minimum data set ratio. So number of
Mhm.
data sets, number of reports that exist globally, and is it above that 2 to 1 at a minimum? But having like almost a heat map or just no column that just shows that percentage compared to them, so it can help to give a little bit of a like something to aim towards to encourage people to like no, you want more reports off of less data sets if possible.
Yeah, that's actually we've got that per data set, but I would love to put that in as a whole tenant metric.
Yeah,
I think that's a
yeah,
really good
because
one.
right, yeah, and like a little card just at the top. It's basically just you already have number of reports, number of data sets, and
Yeah.
it's just a division of the two. And you could have that as just some kind of a grading of green to red, but it like and whatever your rule of thumb is. Mine is at least start with at least two, and hopefully you can get more than that. But that'd be a nice little top level percentage that you'd have up there.
Yeah, definitely. That's going in the backlog, and that one's like you
There
said,
you go.
that's just a division. That's an easy one.
Yeah, exactly. But I think anything else that I think is a good thing to explore for some people starting to familiarize themselves with some of the endpoints that are available as telemetry from Power BI.
Yeah, so I think a big one, and this is another one of toward your question of where do we see a big ROI or where do we see a big impact? And it's again something quite simple. This is an end-to-end data lineage across the entire tenant. And so it includes all of these different things that we see, all of these artifact types, data sources, data sets, reports, dashboards, and users. And what this allows us to do is see end to end how things are interconnected and who has permissions to what. And so we can, for example, select a data source over here on the left. And thanks to cross filtering, we can quickly see everywhere that data source is used across the organization. So we can see that this one source is used, it's got an audience of 4 people. So downstream of this data source, 4 people have permissions to things that will allow them to see rows of data from this source. There are 3 different data sets in 3 different workspaces. There are 4 reports, so we're not hitting a good ratio of reports to data sets here. There's probably some repetition in this. And then we can see all of the individuals who have permissions to one of these things. So we can say that these 4 named entities, these users over here on the right, can see rows of data that came out of this data source that I've selected on the left. But we can go further. I can actually cross-filter in multiple visuals. So I'll hold down the control button and click on a familiar name over here on the right. And what we see here is that one of the data sets and two of the reports have gone away. So Greg Baldini has access to data from this data source via his permissions to these reports and data sets. So I can tell you specifically, this personal workspace one was shared with me because I am not Ben, I am Greg. And this Greg dev one is in my own dev workspace. So I have permissions to this in two different ways. There are two ways I can see rows of information from this data source. And if this is a sensitive data source, for example, finance or HR data, or something that you know you want to keep on lockdown, it's a really powerful thing to be able to come in here and select known sensitive data sources, see everyone who has permission, and if we need to audit that permission, to see exactly the path of how this person has permission to that data. From an audit perspective, or again, looking at the idea of security, we can look at an individual user on the right. And by selecting just that user with no other filters, I can see everything that person has permissions to, all of the reports and dashboards they can see, all of the data sets that they've got permissions to, and also the sources that feed those things. So if I need to check whether, Reed can see what Reed is supposed to see, I can just select your name over on the right-hand side and see everything that you've got permissions to across the entire tenant.
So, and the data sources essentially comes from the Power Query M code extraction that's coming out of there as an endpoint, I think, right?
Yeah, so that's something that the API endpoint does provide for us. We aren't doing any parsing of M code.
Yep.
So we're just what Power BI does, and this is part of the configuration that's necessary for refresh. So every time you have to configure a credential or Power Query, the refresh is asking you what gateway to use, what's the connection string, or what username to use, what credential. All of that configuration is stored as metadata. And so sometimes it's really helpful metadata, and sometimes it's really not. Blob storage is one really annoying example of all it will tell you is that the source is blobs. It won't tell you which blob. If you want to get more detail, we will have to dig into the M code. But for something like a SQL server.
So you get the do you get the tables from this endpoint, or would you have to go to M code to actually get the specific tables and everything else?
Yeah, we'd have to go to M to get to the specific tables, but for SQL Server, we get the server name and the database name. And that's what
I was just gonna say, like, I could imagine a vision of, like, so it is possible, but I'm just doing a bit of work to be able, to do some M code extraction. But getting table level selections would be really interesting too, because I'm sure that at some point, if you're trying to do an audit, like, all right, we actually need to make some changes to this table. What would we screw up in the service if we touched anything in here, or tables or columns? You just have to kind of parse through that. But I could imagine that is also an interesting view of this, to be able to have a hierarchy of databases and tables, and then be able to select that. And again, you get your data sets, reports, dashboards, and users that are connected to that.
Yeah, I had a really good conversation with Ben Grabato maybe a month or two ago about exactly that topic and what you need to do to get that table level detail out of the M code. The short answer is that it's a lot of work. The slightly longer answer is it's a lot of work that I'm very excited to do, but it's not in our immediate development plan.
Well, and they obviously have to, the language is going to be very different depending on which one you're looking at. But I would figure you'd probably start with SQL, just because that's the still the most commonly used one. And then it's like other data sources would be open for that. Like, just some curiosities, because like I'm very curious about this stuff from an endpoint perspective, and also just in the M code. A few things that I've learned recently is also, like, you have query folding, of course, and at least with the SQL profiler, you can actually see what's being folded, because it gives you the queries that are being ran back. I don't think the API though would tell you. It would show you what the query M code was, but I don't think it would tell you 5 out of 10 steps necessarily were being folded versus not folded or anything, would it? If you could just magically snap a finger for that.
No, the API does not do that.
Yep.
That's actually one I'm not sure if we could get out of log analytics, but I'll definitely check that out. We get a lot of detailed metrics about the processing from log analytics, but I don't know if it goes down to a level that would allow us to extract which step folding stopped on.
See, my curiosity is that I do think that there are people who misconfigure privacy levels, and they do they do folding between sources. And I just learned recently that Chris Webb blogged about this, but there is a specific thing that you can do on your source step called enable cross database folding equals true. And you can actually fold between two databases, but that requires data to be passed potentially between those sources for it to do so.
Yeah.
And there definitely there's a risk with just queries when you do merges of data exposure between sources. So I can imagine in a theoretical future, it would be nice to be able to see potential concerning queries that is going from like a SharePoint page to this data, or just two different databases between two servers that are connected to each other that maybe you shouldn't. So having like warnings from an admin level of, oh yeah, somebody made a query that's joining this database, which is where all of our customer social security numbers are, to the kind of more of this public type database that we have, and we should maybe consider taking a look at that, because part of that monitoring is actually getting the yellow and red flags for that. But that would be an interesting bit of telemetry, I think.
Yeah. I mean, we could definitely do some of that today. We could look at what data sets are using multiple databases as a source. That would be very easy to do right now. But to
Yep.
get down to the table level is digging into parsing out M code, which again,
Yep.
that's the sort of project that really excites me, but that's also the sort of thing that will be months before we even have an MVP worth showing anyone. So it's not in our
Yep.
immediate roadmap.
No, I totally get that. As you said, like there's not any, you have to parse and extract, which thankfully M is pretty structured, but then you also have people who comment and then do a bunch of other stuff. There is complexities to getting it to run against 1,000 data sets rather than just one. But I think that's information I'm sure would be super valuable to people as well. And as you said, you just love to get nerdy and dive into the. There's a couple of late nights for me, but I'm gonna have a lot of fun with a good playlist and just getting into the code.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. It's some of the best work I've done has been late night with a glass of wine, and then very necessary, the code review in the morning with the clear light of day.
I'm noticing a PBIX. So interestingly, under your dashboard section, you have a dash. So is that the name of the dashboard, and then all tiles that are related to it from like, so that dashboard has two reports that it is pinned from. Is that what that's telling me?
So this is workspace. This is workspace and dashboard in a hierarchy. So there is a workspace named Argus Dev. It has two different. It has two different dashboards in it. The first dashboard is named daxhacks.pbix. The other one is daxhacks in case of emergency.pbix. Those
so I'm
are
assuming that was it's just the name of the file when you made the dashboard. It just inherited the name and you didn't edit it. Okay.
Those are both
what
the default ones.
What
When
is
publishing
in
a
case
PBI.
of emergency? Is that like if the demo gods fail? Is that like backup? Okay.
Yeah.
See,
So
like instead of web, it's local.
yeah. So those were the demo never included publishing to a workspace. I just needed a couple of specific data sets that I could check something out. So I just uploaded both of those into that workspace. But whenever I'm giving a demo, especially in Power BI Desktop, I always have my demo version, and then I have my Julia child version, which is the cake that you pull out of the oven 5 minutes after you put the first one in, and it's all cooked up and ready to go. So the in case of emergency is the one to open up and show rather than type whatever I was working on.
Yeah, it's I think we're both seasoned enough presenters that we have backups of backups of backups. Like every time I do I have anything online, I will always have something as an alternative in case even though just maybe the Wi-Fi is not working at the conference center. But I just in general, if I can avoid online, I will. But if I have to, then like, all right, what could I talk about if just in theory the Wi-Fi broke? So I'll, even if it's a really like not non-polished, quick and dirty thing, I just want to make sure that I don't have to end my session early and just, sorry guys, I don't really have anything left to talk about.
Yeah, I've got a few presentation decks that have like 50, 60 pages of screenshots at the end, just in case. And I hope never to use them.
Yep. Exactly. You're just like, all right, I'm going to screenshot the 35 steps that I've done, and now we're going to walk through them. I'm just going to talk through these slides. You get the same picture, but yeah, I think it's good to be a little anal when it comes to prepping for some of that stuff, and just making sure that outside of your laptop, literally blue screen, you'll have a way for that. But I think as fun conversations aside, focusing back on uh, the kind of the SaaS platform here, is there anything left as we're starting to kind of like finish a review of this? Any remaining items that you want to show or discussions points that we have to make sure nothing gets missed?
Yeah, I do want to just show off one other report. We've got user
Mhm.
activity, and this is one that we were talking about earlier as well. The idea of mo- long periods of retention. So what we can do is look at user report activity. And again, this is a tenant that we've been monitoring for quite a while. So we can go back much farther than the 30 days of the API endpoint or the 90 days of the Microsoft 365 uh, audit portal. And what we're seeing here, again, I'll bring this down to something a little bit easier to see. What we're looking at is a total number of report views that have happened every single day are the columns, and a total number of unique users are the lines superimposed over. Down at the bottom, we actually get every single detail returned from the API about that activity. So we can see who did the activity, what they were connecting to, what data set and workspace and report they were looking at. If it's something that's on a capacity, what that capacity is. And the Power BI service also captures things like the user agent string and the IP address of the user connecting and doing that activity. But we also go well beyond just report views. We do every single activity type that is returned. And you'll see a whole bunch of stuff with this user, with this GUID. That's actually our service principal that's calling all of the APIs. I'm just going to filter that out because it gets a little bit noisy because this thing is running in the background pretty much nonstop. And so we've got a lot of activity from ourselves, our own monitoring going on. And we include that, obviously. We're not hiding what we do. We'll show you exactly the APIs that we call. But for interacting with this report, it's a bit easier to have that service principal filtered out.
Well, as you
And
can see, just there's a ton of different activities that can be performed in the service. Everything from creating an artifact. I'm assuming analyze in Excel is creating. You clicking the analyze in Excel button to create the file, correct?
no, this is actually when you're connecting to it because it uses a specific connector in Excel. There's enough metadata on the Microsoft side. This is every time someone is connecting via that Excel connector.
Hmm.
Analyzed by
Okay.
external application would be something like a DAX Studio or a tabular editor if you're connecting to the XMLA endpoint. Um, and you'll see actually that it's this MSOLAP 16.0 client.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good to
And so
know.
yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
And so what we're looking at here is just every activity, but the new view that we're working on and should have this published pretty quickly here is a very multi-dimensional view of all the different types of things that you might want to break down. And what we look at is a total number of activities and a total number of users that have performed that activity in given time periods. And we've created some groupings of these categories. This hierarchy isn't something Microsoft provides, just how we've logically grouped things together. So we can say who's everyone that has created something in Power BI in your tenant in the last 60 days, every single create activity. And you'll see there are a lot of different types of creations that someone can do. And you'll see also things like create warehouse or create artifact. These are coming from new Fabric operations. And so if we look at create warehouse, this is actually going to be something that's happening to a Fabric artifact in a specific workspace. One of the annoying things about some of these APIs is, especially on the Fabric front, there are a lot of pieces of information that are not yet being populated. And so we know that a warehouse was created, and we know that it was created in the workspace named utilization, but it doesn't actually have the warehouse name as the artifact name or anything like that. There are IDs that are populated, but we don't want to fill our reports full of GUIDs, so we're not showing those IDs in most of our default views.
Yeah, I mean, unless you go heavily into the back end as well, like, what's going to be the value actually from that, unless somebody has a dictionary of those readily available to go map to.
Well, we've got that dictionary. We just need to finish building it.
Yep, exactly.
The Fabric stuff
But
requires a little bit more work than the existing Power BI stuff.
well, it just shows the fact that it's still in preview. So, like, I mean, Fabric has a huge potential, but they are still there will continue to be a lot of changes made to that platform before it's finalized. I mean, we just got like that badge update of like all the icons
Mhm.
got rebranded because they were
Again,
so similar look. Well, yeah, like my God, is like, thankfully there's color on them now. Like, but it before it's just like they all look the same from like a distance. It's just give it something. So they heard community feedback and like, okay, we'll give you some better icons.
Yeah. And so, yeah, it's a lot of exciting stuff coming with Fabric, and I'm excited just to see a little bit more information populated for some of these activities that are related to Fabric. But we can also break down activities by quite a few other dimensions than just the activity type.
Mhm.
So we can look at the artifact kind, and again, there's a whole bunch of blank, which is a lot of Fabric stuff based on what we've looked at so far. But we can see whether we're operating on reports, models, dashboards. So we can say everything that happened to a model by selecting this. We can narrow it down based on workspaces. We can also say what were all of the create or edit things that were done to models.
Mhm.
And so here's everyone who has edited a model or a data set in the last 60 days in our tenant. And we can go through, I'm not going to stop on every single level in this hierarchy, but we've got quite a few. We can break down activities by capacity. So we can see which capacities people are doing things on, what capacities are getting the most stuff created, for example, what capacities are getting things deleted off of them. And we can go through a bunch of other different items here. We can see which experience they were using to consume, whether it was Power BI on the web, whether it was Power BI mobile, whether it was through the Teams apps, things like that. We can also see how someone was accessing a thing. So for all of these activities, were they accessing that report or that data set via an app? Or were they going directly to the workspace and opening up the report in that workspace? Or was it shared directly with them? They didn't navigate anywhere or open anything. They just used that share link directly. And so we've got a breakdown of pretty much any categorization you might want for activities. So here we're looking at workspaces, and I can see, what are all of the view activities by workspace? And so we can see that the activity
Yep, okay.
or the workspace that has the most viewing happening is this Fabric Preview workspace. Yeah. And so we've got pretty much every categorization you might want available in our rows on this matrix, and you can drill through and find those. And if there are specific groupings or specific filters, again, everything is in Power BI, so it's just a personal bookmark away to keep this customized to exactly the types of analysis you're doing in your tenant.
What's
And
in the
this,
other section, out of curiosity? We have create, delete, edit. Yeah, what is an other?
yeah, so it's
Connect to get, okay.
yeah, so there's a bunch of stuff in here. These were things I didn't come up with a good name for yet. This hierarchy is entirely created by us, so there's a bunch of API interactions that are in here. All of these gets are things that you would call an API for. Installing an app, I didn't have a good place to put that. This is probably going to go through a couple more revisions of this hierarchy to make it more meaningful and approachable for our customers. But this is our V1 hierarchy for this. And so this is an area where we're actually enhancing the data that Microsoft provides and giving categorization, giving more context, and giving helpful, useful labels for someone in Power BI. Because if you want to look at, for example, edits, there are a lot of different things that you can edit and a lot of different activities that do that, and they don't even all start with edit in the name. So change capacity state, that's a modification, that's an edit in some way. But it
I like
doesn't
that you're
say,
adding a bit of business logic to this to group some of these, which makes it easier to find rather than giving them a master list of everything.
Yep. And so this is also
That's
based
helpful.
on, this is based on our own internal feedback. This is based on some
Yep.
stuff we've heard from customers. Like, I just want to know everyone who's changing things and where are they doing it.
Okay. No, this is great.
Yeah. And so this page specifically is another preview page, but this one should be going live, like I said, within the next couple of weeks. These are the things I wanted to cover in the demo, but I did also just want to mention that right now, if anyone wants to sign up, we're covering your first month for free as a trial period with Argus. So you can come to our arguspbi.com, and your first month for all of this monitoring will be free. Everything that we saw today. If you're interested specifically in any of the preview pieces, we're happy to spin those preview bits up for you in your Argus tenant so that you'll be able to see all of those. But like I said, 30-day free trial, absolutely no commitment for anyone who's listening today. And all of these things that we looked at today is available now. If you're interested in the preview stuff, just let us know and we can spin that up for you as we do all of your onboarding. But that's everything.
I just dropped the,
yeah.
I was going to say, and I just dropped the link into the chat as well for anyone wanting to go check that out.
Awesome. Thank you so much. But yeah, that's everything that I wanted to cover. I think there's a lot of information available. We're still just scratching the surface, and we're plowing forward as fast as we can. We're going to keep enhancing the reports that we've got. And like I said, our next major data source onboarding is going to be log analytics, so that we can do whole capacity monitoring for every capacity in your organization and really start getting into some cost savings and cost management of those capacities. Instead of scaling, optimize, and we'll point you where to optimize.
I think it's certainly a great tool, and it provides a significantly higher amount of telemetry than you can get natively. And especially just on that last one with the activity, broken it up into groupings and everything else, so you can know kind of by like action type what specifically is being done and where. Actually, here's one last question from James that I think will be a great follow-up to this. Is there any non-profit or educational pricing planned?
We don't have specific pricing for nonprofits or education right now. Our pricing is pretty simple. We've got a $400 SKU, which gets you everything that we saw today, plus a year of data retention and 8 refreshes daily of that data in your reports. And then we've also got an enterprise plan at $1,500 a month that includes unlimited data retention, as well as an onboarding consultation with weekly office hours for your first month of using the product. James, though, it is a very good question. We haven't gotten to the point of delineating our pricing further than this, but definitely feel free to reach out and mention that, and we'll see what we can do to make things approachable for nonprofit and education sector clients.
Excellent. Thank you for the question, James. But yeah, Greg, this has been fantastic. I appreciate you walking through this tool, and I definitely think there's a lot of space out there for additional monitoring tools like this. And having a turnkey solution is really nice for companies that don't have a developer who can create all these reports themselves, utilizing the API and having to do custom connectors or anything else. So it's nice to be able to have those out there if and when somebody needs to start this up tomorrow. So a great additional resource to see. So thank you for coming on and sharing this today.
Yeah, thanks so much for giving us time. Like I said, I really want to drive forward the conversation of operating Power BI, and this is the path that I'm taking to make sure that we can mature the entire practice of Power BI across the industry. It's an exciting space to be in.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I look forward to having you back on sometime in the near future as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love that.
Perfect. Then enjoy your weekend, everyone. Thanks for tuning in today, and I will see all of you online next week. Greg, take care and have a great weekend.
Thanks very much, and thanks everyone for spending time.
Cheers.
Bye.
Thank you so much for watching. Please consider hitting that like and subscribe button. And if you want to help support this channel, take a look at our channel memberships or our merchandise store for cool swag. And last but not least, please consider sharing this video on your social media platform of choice to help our channel grow. So, until next time.